Here's a shocking question to start with. How often does a former president get so angry in court that a judge threatens to throw him out of his own trial? Not once, not twice, almost never. Yet this time, it happened in front of a jury in real time, with cameras watching every move. And it wasn't because of some minor argument or legal technicality. It was triggered by something far more dangerous. What caused the explosion? A once loyal insider, someone who stood just feet away from Donald Trump for years, took the stand and dropped the bombshell no one saw coming. This wasn't a political enemy. This wasn't a media critic. This was someone who knew Trump's private habits, private moments, and private decisions. And under oath, he told a story so damaging that Trump visibly lost control. What you're about to hear isn't just courtroom drama. It could be a turning point, a moment that reshapes the entire case, threatens Trump's defense, and changes how this trial may end. Stay with me, because the next few minutes explain why this moment matters more than anything so far. What makes this moment so explosive isn't just what was said in court, it's who said it. This witness wasn't a random employee, a disgruntled ex-staffer, or a political opponent looking for revenge. This was someone who lived in Trump's orbit every single day, someone who handled his personal items, stood beside him during private moments, and saw how he behaved when he thought no one important was watching. When a jury hears testimony like that, it immediately hits different. This isn't speculation, this is inside knowledge. For years, Trump surrounded himself with people chosen for one reason above all else: loyalty. And this witness was considered one of the most loyal of all. That's why this testimony landed like a thunderbolt. Jurors tend to ask one simple question: why would someone this close suddenly turn? The answer is usually powerful and credible. People don't lightly accuse someone they once protected, especially someone as powerful as Donald Trump. That's why prosecutors value insider witnesses so highly. They don't just tell a story, they confirm a pattern. This is also why Trump's reaction was so intense. Losing the narrative to a stranger is one thing. Losing it to someone who knows your routines, your habits, and your private reactions is something else entirely. It feels personal. It feels uncontrollable. And in a courtroom, that loss of control is dangerous. When an insider speaks, jurors don't just hear words. They imagine the scenes. They picture the moments. And once that picture forms, it's incredibly hard to erase. That's why this witness wasn't just another voice. He was the most damaging voice possible. One of the most important reasons this moment shook the courtroom is simple but powerful. This wasn't secondhand information. This wasn't someone told me or I heard about it later. This witness told the jury very clearly, I saw it with my own eyes. In legal cases, that distinction changes everything. Eyewitness testimony cuts through confusion, excuses, and legal spin. It gives jurors something solid to hold on to, an actual human being describing what happened in real time. Most high-profile trials rely heavily on documents, timelines, and expert interpretations. Those matter, but they can feel abstract. Eyewitness accounts are different. They create images in the jury's mind. Instead of thinking about paperwork or legal arguments, jurors picture a real moment, a real action, and a real decision. That's why prosecutors place enormous value on eyewitnesses, especially when they're calm, detailed, and confident under oath. And that's exactly what happened here. This is also why the testimony was so hard for the defense to attack. You can argue about intent, you can debate legal interpretations, but it's much harder to explain away a witness who says, I was there. And this is what I saw to discredit that. The defense has to convince jurors that the witness is lying outright, and that as a risky move, when the witness has nothing to gain and everything to lose by being untruthful. This is where pressure builds, tension rises, and cracks start to form. And judging by what happened next in the courtroom, that pressure hit Trump hard. What truly sent shockwaves through the courtroom was not just that documents went missing, but that the witness described intentional destruction. This wasn't about carelessness or paperwork being misplaced. The testimony painted a picture of deliberate action, taken at a time when investigators were actively looking for those very materials. That distinction is critical. In simple terms, accidents can be explained away. Purposeful actions cannot. Jurors understand that difference instantly, even without legal training. The description itself was vivid and unsettling. The witness didn't speak in vague language or broad claims. He described a specific place, a specific moment, and a specific action. That kind of detail matters because it signals memory, not imagination. Prosecutors aim for this kind of clarity because it allows jurors to visualize the event as if they were standing in the room themselves. Once that mental image forms, it becomes emotionally powerful and incredibly difficult for the defense to undo. This is where everything escalates. Allegations of intentional evidence destruction strike at the heart of accountability. It suggests awareness, fear of consequences, and a conscious decision to interfere with an investigation. For jurors, that often raises a simple but devastating question. If there was nothing to hide, why destroy anything at all? That question lingers. It doesn't require legal jargon or expert explanation. It relies on common sense. And when common sense starts aligning with testimony, the defense loses ground fast. This single allegation didn't just add damage, it changed the entire story of the case, turning it from a dispute over records into a question of deliberate obstruction. What takes this testimony from troubling to devastating is when the alleged actions happened. According to the witness, these events didn't occur years earlier in some vague, forgettable moment. They happened after authorities had already made it clear they were seeking the documents. That timing matters more than almost anything else in a courtroom. Jurors may forgive confusion, they may forgive mistakes, but actions taken after official requests signal awareness, and awareness changes how everything is judged. In simple terms, timing tells intent. If documents disappear before anyone asks for them, a defense can argue sloppiness or misunderstanding, but when something happens after repeated requests, legal notices, and warnings, the story changes completely. Prosecutors don't even need complicated explanations here. The sequence speaks for itself. First comes the request, then comes the alleged destruction. That order alone raises red flags in the minds of jurors because it suggests a response to pressure, not coincidence. This is also why Trump's courtroom reaction became so intense at this point in the testimony. Timing removes wiggle room. It limits excuses. It corners the defense into uncomfortable positions where every explanation sounds forced or unlikely. Jurors naturally ask themselves, why act at that exact moment if nothing was wrong? That question doesn't need legal training to feel persuasive. It's rooted in everyday logic, how people behave when they feel threatened or exposed. And once jurors start thinking that way, the momentum shifts. The case stops being about paperwork and becomes about choices made under pressure. That's when a trial truly turns dangerous for a defendant, and that's exactly what this testimony appeared to do. One of the most damaging moments didn't come from the witness stand, it came from Trump himself. As the testimony unfolded, Trump didn't sit quietly or appear calm and confident like defendants are advised to do. Instead, he reacted visibly, repeatedly, shaking his head, muttering under his breath, growing more agitated as each detail landed in a courtroom, especially in front of a jury. Every move matters. Jurors are not just listening to witnesses, they are watching the defendant just as closely. This is where things crossed a dangerous line. When the witness described the most damaging moments, Trump reportedly blurted out accusations loud enough for jurors to hear. That's when the judge stepped in and issued a rare and serious warning: control yourself or you may be removed from your own trial. That kind of warning is extraordinary. Judges expect emotion, but not disruption. When a judge feels the need to threaten removal, it sends a clear signal to the jury that the behavior is not normal, not appropriate, and not helping the defendant's case. From a juror's perspective, this kind of behavior raises uncomfortable questions. People naturally ask themselves, why is he reacting this way? Calm defendants project confidence. Explosive defendants project fear, anger, or desperation. Even if that perception isn't fair, it's powerful. Jurors are human. When they see someone lose control, precisely when the most damaging testimony is presented, many interpret it as a sign that the testimony hit close to home, instead of undermining the witness. Trump's reactions may have unintentionally reinforced the story being told. In a trial built on credibility, composure matters, and in that moment, composure was gone, replaced by raw emotion that the jury will not forget. When the judge stepped in and warned that Trump could be removed from his own trial, the tone of the courtroom instantly changed. This wasn't a casual reminder or a mild rebuke. It was a clear line being drawn. Judges are trained to maintain order calmly and quietly, especially in high-profile cases. For a judge to openly threaten removal tells jurors something important. The behavior crossed from emotional into disruptive. That moment alone reframed everything they were watching. For most jurors, this may have been the first time they'd ever seen such a warning issued to a defendant, let alone a former president. And that's crucial. Jurors tend to trust judges as neutral authority figures, so when a judge signals that a defendant is out of bounds, it carries weight. It subtly tells the jury that what's happening is not normal courtroom conduct and that The testimony triggering the reaction is serious enough to provoke loss of control. That perception lingers long after the warning itself. Even more damaging is what the warning implies psychologically. Defendants have a constitutional right to be present at their trials, but that right comes with responsibility. When a judge reminds everyone that the right can be forfeited through behavior, it highlights a lack of restraint. Jurors may not know the law, but they understand self-control. And when someone appears unable to control themselves at a critical moment, it undermines the image of reasonableness the defense tries so hard to project. Instead of seeing a calm individual unfairly targeted, jurors see someone struggling to sit still while accusations are laid out in a trial where credibility is everything. That shift is devastating. The warning didn't just stop an outburst, it quietly amplified the damage already done, making the testimony feel even more serious and the defendant's reaction even more telling. Up until this testimony, Trump's defense had a clear and carefully built narrative. The argument was simple. Any problems with documents were misunderstandings handled by staff or lawyers, not Trump himself. That story depended on distance between Trump and the actions in question. As long as the defense could keep Trump one step removed, they could argue confusion, bad advice, or bureaucratic chaos. But this witness erased that distance completely. Once an insider places Trump directly at the center of the actions, the defense is forced into an uncomfortable corner. They now have only two risky options. Either they accuse a longtime trusted aide of lying under oath, or they try to explain away behavior that looks deliberate and ill-timed. Both paths are dangerous. Calling the witness a liar risks alienating jurors, especially when the witness appears calm, detailed, and consistent. But accepting the witness's account means admitting actions that are extremely hard to justify. There's no easy exit. This is where trials often turn. Jurors can sense when lawyers are scrambling, when explanations become complicated, and when answers stop feeling natural. The defense earlier themes, political targeting, misunderstandings, overreach, suddenly feel disconnected from what jurors just heard instead of one clean story. They're presented with fragmented explanations that require mental gymnastics to accept. And when jurors have to work too hard to believe something, they usually don't. The testimony didn't just hurt Trump, it forced the defense off its footing. From that moment on, the case stopped being about abstract arguments and became about whether the defense could recover credibility at all. What made this testimony especially hard to dismiss was that it didn't stand alone. The witness didn't rely only on memory or verbal claims. He came prepared with contemporaneous notes and evidence that lined up with his account in court. That's a big deal. Jurors are often skeptical of human memory, especially when events happened months or years earlier. But notes taken at the time events occurred change that. Calculation, they suggest concern, awareness, and a reason to document what was happening in the moment, not after the fact. From a juror's perspective, this creates a powerful sense of reliability. It tells them the witness didn't suddenly invent a story under pressure. Instead, he noticed something was wrong and began recording it before prosecutors ever entered the picture. That timing matters just as much as the content. It shows the witness wasn't reacting to a plea deal. He was reacting to behavior that made him uneasy long before his own legal exposure became real. And that alone strengthens credibility in a way that defense attorneys struggle to counter. Even more damaging is how these notes reportedly align with other forms of evidence already presented. When written records, timelines, and physical findings point in the same direction, jurors start seeing a pattern, not an allegation. It becomes less about trusting one person and more about recognizing consistency across multiple sources. At that point, attacking the witness personally doesn't solve the problem. The defense would need jurors to believe that notes, circumstances, and corroborating details all coincidentally support a false story. And that's a hard sell. This is where many cases quietly tip, not with dramatic statements, but with layers of confirmation that stack up until doubt has nowhere left to hide. For many jurors, this testimony likely didn't land in isolation. It fit into a pattern they may already recognize. Over the years, multiple people who once stood firmly by Trump eventually chose cooperation when faced with serious legal consequences. Each time the story followed a similar path. Intense loyalty at the beginning, public defense of Trump, and then a sudden shift to when personal freedom was on the line. That pattern matters because it challenges the idea that this witness is some rare exception or bitter outlier. Jurors tend to look for consistency in human behavior. When they see the same outcome repeat again and again, they start asking why. Is it really believable that so many former insiders independently decided to lie? Or is it more likely that proximity to power eventually collided with legal reality? This witness didn't appear eager or emotional. He didn't grandstand. He did what others before him have done. Made a calculation, cooperation over incarceration. That decision may not be admirable, but it is understandable. And jurors understand it instinctively. This is also why claims of political persecution lose force in moments like this. Political enemies can be dismissed as biased. Media critics can be waved away. But people who once benefited from loyalty, access, and protection are harder to explain away. They had something to lose by speaking, and even more to lose if they lied. When jurors connect those dots, they begin to see the testimony not as betrayal, but as self-preservation. And once that shift happens, the emotional framing changes completely. The witness stops looking like a traitor and starts looking like someone who finally chose reality over loyalty in a courtroom. That perception can be fatal to a defense because it reframes the narrative from everyone is against me too. Even the people closest to me couldn't stay silent. This moment doesn't end when the court day adjourns. What happened here sends shockwaves far beyond a single courtroom or a single case. When an insider delivers detailed, damaging testimony under oath and the defendant reacts with visible rage, it creates consequences that ripple outward. Other investigators notice, other prosecutors take notes, and other potential witnesses start reevaluating their own situations. This kind of testimony doesn't exist in a vacuum. It becomes a reference point for everything that comes next. From a legal standpoint, this opens doors that were previously harder to push through. Testimony describing intentional actions, supported by documentation and strong reactions from the defendant, can attract attention from other jurisdictions and other cases. It can also encourage additional insiders to cooperate, especially those who may have been sitting on the fence. Once one person speaks, the silence breaks. And history shows that when silence breaks, it often breaks all at once. That possibility alone changes the balance of power. Moving forward, the political consequences may be just as significant. Legal arguments can be complicated and easy for supporters to dismiss, but stories are different. Vivid moments stick. Voters do not need to understand statutes or courtroom procedures to grasp the image of a defendant losing control as a trusted insider speaks. That image lingers. It shapes conversations, media coverage, and public perception in ways that legal briefs never could. This is why moments like this are remembered long after verdicts are delivered. They define narratives. In the end, this wasn't just another bad day in court. It was a turning point, a moment where pressure, evidence, emotion, and credibility collided. Whether or not this single testimony determines the final outcome, it has already changed the trajectory of the case and possibly much more. When insiders talk and defendants react like this, the ground shifts, and once it shifts, there's no going back.